Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's virtual program here at the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art in Hartford, Connecticut. My name is Adam Lenz, and I'm the Public Engagement and Programs Manager here at the museum. And in addition to my role in the Education Department, I come to the museum with a background in experimental music, which makes the honor of welcoming our guests this evening all much greater for me personally. We're very excited to be joined tonight by multidisciplinary artists Naama Tsabar and Laurie Anderson in a Matrix past and present conversation. This program brings together a past Matrix artist with our current Matrix artist in a conversation at the intersection of their practices, and is part of an ongoing series leading up to the 50th anniversary of the Matrix series here at the Wadsworth. Since 1975, Matrix has been a platform for art that is current, challenging, and sometimes controversial. The series has presented well over 1,000 works of art and has inspired more than 50 programs at museums across the country. Laurie Anderson came to the Wadsworth in 1979 for Matrix 46, where she presented her installation, Songs for the Night Driver. Since that time, she has secured her position as one of America's most renowned and daring creative pioneers. Known primarily for her multimedia presentations, she has cast herself in roles as varied as visual artist, composer, poet, photographer, filmmaker, vocalist, and instrumentalist. Recently, she served as the 2021-2022 Charles Eliot Norton Professor of Poetry at Harvard University. And tonight, she joins us as her acclaimed retrospective, The Weather is in Its Final Days at the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. Naama Tsabar's practice fuses elements from sculpture, music, performance, and architecture. Her interactive works, including those presented in her Matrix exhibition here at the Wadsworth, expose hidden spaces and systems, reconceive gendered narratives, and shift the viewing experience to one of active participation. Her works have been presented in exhibitions and performances at a wide range of venues, including the Guggenheim, the High Line, the Bass, the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, MoMA PS1, and Kassman Gallery, among others. Born in Israel, she lives and works in New York City. We hope that you'll join us at the Wadsworth between now and September 11th to see Naama's exhibition, Melodies of Certain Damage, Opus 6, which is the 189th Matrix exhibition. We are pleased to invite you to a series of closing performances on September 11th, where Naama and a group of local women and non-binary musicians will activate the exhibition through site-specific musical composition. Tickets will be available next week on our website for those performances. And last, before I hand the program over to Naama and Laurie, I just want to take a moment to thank a number of people who have made tonight's program possible. Patricia Hickson, our Emily Hall Tremaine Curator of Contemporary Art, who curates and organizes the Matrix series here at the Wadsworth. The members of the Contemporary Coalition, whose generous financial contributions ensure that continuation of the Matrix series is a reality. The Joseph and Robert Cornell Memorial Foundation, whose fund at the Wadsworth supports the presentation of our public programs, and the Greater Hartford Arts Council's United Arts Campaign, and the Department of Economic and Community Development for their sustaining support of the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art. Thank you again for joining us. I really hope you enjoy the program, and I'm happy to hand things over to Naama Tsabar.
Thanks, Adam. Hey, Laurie.
Hey, Naama.
So I think we're going to start with just talking a bit about our Matrix projects. And I'll go first.
So yes, please, because I've got a kind of foggy memory of what mine was, but yours is there, and you're going to do a concert as well coming up. So I'd love to hear about if you have a sneak preview on that. I don't know.
Yeah. So the installation I have up is called Melodies of Certain Damage, Opus 6. It's a grouping of sculptures, all of the same body of work that's called Melody of Certain Damage. And well, I view the exhibition as a sort of kind of like a landscape of debris, of broken things on the floor. But the process of making these works starts off in the studio. I order new guitars, electric guitars. I tune them and I break them alone in the studio. And the way they break, the way they scatter, I record that into a map. And so this chance factor of the break is recorded into a map that is then used every time the works are reinstalled. And so it's retaining that kind of that moment of chance, or the outlines of my studio that, you know, it bumped off this and that wall and landed at a certain place. I then go on to fastening the pieces to the floor and putting new sets of strings on them. So piano strings and guitar strings, and kind of bringing them back into this working order as an instrument, putting some piezos on them. They can be amplified, and they are always on. So interaction is permitted. I never ask people to play or interact, but of course, if they choose to cross that border, they are rewarded. And yeah, as you mentioned, I'm coming together with a group of local musicians in late August, early September, to compose a piece specifically in the space on these works. There's 7 works. That's an installation view of the gallery right now at the Wadsworth.
And can you describe a little bit about the breaking, what you did?
Yeah, I get these guitars that I, in a way, always wanted, but never could afford, and I tune them. And I'm alone in the studio. I usually choose a song to listen to very loudly, and I place plastic underneath all over the floor to record the break and the scatter, and I break it. And you know, over years.
How do you break it? I mean, you
exactly,
just slam it down on the floor, or what?
Yeah, you know, the first thing that snaps is the neck.
Yeah,
it just goes really fast. And so I've learned over time that if I want the body to break, which I usually do because I find it more appealing and it brings on more possibilities of kind of putting sets of strings on it, then I have to hold it a certain way. So I do hold it at the neck, but I hold it very close to the body with 2 hands. And I hit it first on the side, on the profile, and then switching to hitting it flat on the face. Some of them take quite a while to break, and especially kind of the breaking of the body. But there's definitely a way to break a guitar. It's not as easy as one would assume.
Mm-hmm.
And then
how does it feel? How does it feel to break an instrument like that? What do you feel when you're slamming it down and breaking it?
It's hard. it's
I mean, I know physically. I mean, how do you?
Yeah. After the fact, it's a different energy that enters the body, no doubt. There's something.
But I mean, during, not after.
I don't know how it feels during. I think it's kind of like performance. It's more like it's kind of like a extra hyper state of awareness where things are moving fast but going slow, you know. And so the thoughts that go through my mind are things from how, okay, this is not breaking. How do I shift my body to, you know, thinking about the guitar itself and how it's made. And in the body, the feeling is one of violence.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, it's violent. It's violent. It's very violent.
And is that when do you feel that? Because I'm just asking because I was listening to a podcast today of a friend's son, and my friend was a weatherman, and we were just thinking about like what happened in when the weathermen were first forming and what they were trying to do, and it was they were talking about violence, and they were talking about the especially the Chicago, what so-called days of rage, when weathermen went through the police lines and began 4 days of riots, basically surrounding the Vietnam War. And they were just talking, he was just talking about the exhilaration of, as they were running through the streets and breaking windows, that each window that was broken revved the crowd up even more, and himself as well. He said, I didn't know I would be so satisfied with this breaking sound. And then of course the reaction to these student revolutionaries was, of course, let's crush that movement. And he said, isn't that sort of weird to accuse people of violence in the country that's probably the most violent country in the world, and so that's why I'm just interested in your feelings as your impulse to do this, because it's a and maybe if you could just say a little bit more about that, like what draws you to this and what makes you want to do it, and how does it feel? Or maybe you just don't want to talk about that. I don't know.
No, I can certainly talk about it. I think it's a couple questions there. For me, I think there's a distinction for me between a performative act and an act that is I do alone in the studio, this is one of them. And for me, it's almost like a sculptural process, breaking it.
Right.
And that's why I think about, how is this breaking? How is this moving? How the material is forming through my motions, or coming apart in this instance, through my motions. And those are the thoughts that go through my mind. When I perform, I have this performance that I started in 2008, and it's called Untitled Babies. And it's a group of it's a female band. I head it. I'm playing guitar and singing, and I do this cover version for a song by Pulp. It's called Babies. And at the height of the song, I take the guitar off and I start smashing it on the stage live. But it's a guitar that I reinforced in a way that it could never break. And so it becomes a sort of like a failure. The guitar doesn't break. And in time, I continue, and what actually breaks is the stage itself, the floor underneath me, kind of opening this void. And for that performance, that violent act, that kind of like is very exhilarating. It's a complete exhaustion act. It ends when I drop physically, cannot go anymore. Mm-hmm. But it is a place where the violence is performative, and in that there's catharsis that is very that is very filling. With these works, I don't necessarily feel that in the breaking of them. And and you were asking about what brought me to it. For me, my kind of musical upbringing is playing piano and playing guitar a bit later in my life, electric guitar specifically, and performing with bands. And for me, there's something about rethinking this instrument and the way it could be played and used, and expanding its possibilities that the break offers.
Mm-hmm. Looking at these, it seems like I mean, there's a lot of violence in making too, as well as breaking, and like with what you've been doing with these after that first initial cut or break is quite intricate and you know, making it into a kind of a network almost of sound making, you know, instrument that's much bigger than it was as a single thing. So
Yeah.
deconstructing it and pulling it apart to do that, because you don't feel the same somehow impulsive that I would imagine that, for example, Ai Weiwei has when he breaks the pot, you know, the ancient Chinese
Yeah.
pot, which is also a kind of specific act of well, I don't want to speak for him, but when I initially saw these, I was reminded of a concert that I did in Moscow in the mid-90s, and I got there to do a show, and I opened my instrument case, and every single thing in it had been surgically sawed in half. Every keyboard, every violin, every piece of electronics, every foot pedal, right down the middle, not broken in like, you know, in violence, but just surgically sawed in half. And I had not been told who to pay off, I guess, in customs. So, you know, that's what happened. And they said, so I opened it and said, well, I can't do the show because, you know, there's no instruments. And they said, you will be doing the show. I was like, what? And they said, there it is, you know, go over there and do it. And I had been, I mean, I don't know about how story and music work for you, but for me, they intertwine. But so in this case, the text for that show was very, very complicated. It was quite long, and I'd worked with a Russian translator for almost a year. And he was asking questions that made me realize he's like, thinks he's writing Dostoevsky or something. Because so they said, you'll do the show. So I sat on a chair in the middle of the stage, and with no films, all the little bells and whistles I usually use, I just read the text. And at the end of the show, people are going, you are so Russian.
You're so hardcore.
Russian. Because this guy had really tried to get nuance into and they don't think Americans are capable of nuance. So they were like, well, it was like, you're like a talking monkey. Wow, you can talk. So it was, so that was my first feeling when I saw these instruments. But then, of course, I see that they become a kind of hyper instruments and that don't feel particularly they seem more melancholy than violent to me, you know, and more like debris that has been reactivated, brought back to life, you know, in some way, that using fragments you can make music, which I really like a lot about seeing these sort of strewn bits around. They're very kind of lovely also because, I mean, I think unless so people will come in and play as is. I mean, they'll walk around and play different elements of this. How will that work in the concert?
Yeah, the concert will be different. So I mean, I think of this installation having two existences. One is during like install when the works are up and people can interact. And then the other is the concert. And the concert is a complete collaboration. It's not my work per se, it's on my work.
It's not playing these instruments.
We are playing these instruments, yeah.
As they sit in the studio.
Yeah, they're as they broke in the studio and now sit in the gallery space.
Okay.
But we come together for 7 days of rehearsals before, very long rehearsals, with these musicians that most of which I've never met nor worked with. And we, through a set of kind of like exercises and improvisation, we compose this piece that we then perform a week and a half later. And so in that sense, you know, the concert for it is a complete collaboration, where it's nothing that I could have done alone. And it's something that is completely through this meeting of a small community that came together to learn how to play these instruments that have no kind of mastery, history of mastery behind them. And, you know, I actually have like a short snippet if we want to watch from.
Oh, I'd love to see that. Let's look at that.
Yeah, it's like 3 minutes, but
Great.
but before we do that, I want to also say, Laurie, you know, I think you totally like it's very true. I think the violence for me is not the focus, but rather the moment of healing afterwards. You know, the moment of thinking of how things can move after the moment of the break. For me, the work starts after the break. So it's, you know, it's just a short moment. Some context is this is a performance that we did in this new art center called Kino Saito, which is up in Verplank, New York. And it was just on the kind of like, it was just the days before, you know, the Supreme Court came to its devastating conclusion. But everybody already knew where it was going. And I remember as we were writing that performance together, Roe was really on our minds. And so I think that was a place that we took that performance specifically to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's good to channel some rage about that. And, you know, and speaking of which, I mean, I just find it so incredibly odd that more artists in this country aren't saying anything at all. And I wondered what you thought of that and and why you think that is. I mean, it's particularly just in terms of that situation and in the hearings as well. I'm just starting to work on something. I'm a big fan of Pauline Oliveras and her deep listening projects, and it's her 90th birthday, and so what we're trying to do is come up with something to celebrate her. And I was just thinking like that maybe of combining this idea of deep listening and the hearings, because the women who are testifying at the hearings are, not only are they being called, mental incompetence, but they're also getting death threats. And while the other people who are testifying at the hearings, particularly the men in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, as Cheney pointed out, are hiding behind executive privilege and not speaking. And so it tends to be, I'm just hoping we can find a way to express support for people who are able to find the courage to speak like they are. And so I love hearing your reaction to that, and I can certainly feel I can feel it in how the musicians were playing. I'm also just trying to think of other ways to kind of shine a light on some other aspects of what's going on in this country. Do you have ambitions to engage in that way, or do your politics and your work tend to be in parallel, and how does that work in terms of activism for you?
It's a good question. I think we should probably all ask ourselves that question, because it's really needed right now. For me, I feel, I'm not, it's complicated for me. I have very little faith in politics. And I see it as being very, partisan and corrupt. And
the majority in that opinion.
I think it's a consensus. And that just really brings me down in a way that's really, it's very deep and very existential almost, as how have we gotten to this point, and how can we move forward with these, with these things in place as they are. And so I revert back to my art. I try to be vocal within those platforms, but also I'm feminist. I try to include that in every step I take and make, because I do think that I know that we are so behind much more than what we think, in everything having to do with women's rights. And it's not only, the rights of our body. I think it's much larger. And I see shows that are put up in specific places, that have artists that are misogynists, but somehow they have another narrative that is super hip right now, or very fashionable. And so you have a blind spot. And there's too often that I feel there's blind spots for women's issues and women's place. And so I try to bring my work to be in the hands of women and people that identify as female and gender nonconforming individuals, to try to make a space and a place for them, you know, to be seen and heard. But I know it's also small, but I would love to hear what's your take on it, and where do you feel you put that, if you do?
It's very tricky. I mean, and also it leaks into things whether I want it to or not, because I never quite know what I'm going to make when I set out to make something. But things like rage and confusion definitely have their way of getting into work, even though you think, well, I mean, I don't think it's a, you know, I don't know how effective it is, but when people ask me whether art can change the world, I'm like, you know.
That's really daunting. Yeah.
The answer is a definitive yes. It absolutely can. I mean, in ways that, in terms, particularly, I think of empathy. I mean, the best example I can think of it really is, you know, like Bob Dylan, who did things like, you know, wrote songs about losers, you know, and championed a loser, romanticized a loser, made a loser kind of glamorous. And this was a great achievement, you know, because we're a country that likes winners, you know, and so just to say, well, losing is also a thing of beauty. And Leonard Cohen also, his first book was called Beautiful Losers, I think, you know, and I think I'm very attracted to that idea of looking at what happens when you lose.
Yeah, like in Moscow.
Yeah. And so and acknowledging, you know, vulnerability and so I do think that that can have a huge effect on but it's also now, of course, it's who's telling the better story of left or right, which faction in terms of but I mean, I don't see this as really just pure politics at all anymore. I see this as cultural ripping that I think I don't feel like, oh, I shouldn't do politics. You know, this is life of, you know, this what's going on now is not. It's I suppose really it's about what's real and what isn't, and that is very much about what I'm interested in as an artist. And so the sense of unreality that people have had for years of living in this country, like going, what, that just can't be real. Those people are like, what are they talking about? That's not real. That's a huge, huge thing. What's real and what is not. That's my theme as an artist. So now that it's on everybody's mind, along with, you know, what does it mean to talk about collapse without going into like apocalyptic porn stuff, you know, because there's a lot of that as well. You know, you just like talk about it endlessly until it's just like, whoa, stop. So I don't know. I no longer think that this dividing line of like what's politics and what isn't makes any sense. You know, it's life as we know it, and what we're trying to think of what's real and what's not is a struggle that everybody is having now. And it's an amazing time to be an artist, because that's in many ways what we I can see in your work, I can see in my work, I can see in, you know, work of many artists of so not to mention filmmakers, writers, and, you know, but what's bizarre is how quiet we are in this.
What should we do, Laurie? What should we do?
Well, I don't say I have any answers, but one
No, I know.
I do think is like, it, one thing I just signed up to do was like celebrate an artist like Pauline Oliveros in the context of speaking up and women's voices. So that to me is like about hearing and listening is it's something that's if we can make that sexy, then it's and if we can't, and if we just like if people just continue to be holding on to other models of how to behave, which is mostly out of rage and fear, which are really the same thing, I guess, then it's it won't work at all. But a friend of mine was saying, she was trying to think of what's an emotion that all human beings have, that everyone shares. And she was like, what could it be? Could it be like curiosity, survival instinct, love, joy? And she came up with, after I was thinking about it a long time, with one thing that everyone shares, which is fear. And I immediately thought, right on, that's what it is. Everyone knows what you're talking about with that. So when you appeal to that, you appeal to something very, very basic and very universal, and when you appeal to love, people are like, oh, yeah, okay. How exciting is that? So, but fear, yes, fear. That is one big trigger right there. So it's an easier game to play, but and so if you could like, I'm not saying that it's about button pushing, but it somewhat is. It somewhat is, because you make things that people have empathy with, or they don't. And whenever, I don't know about you, but I'm just not interested in making new forms particularly. And it's like to me, it's like a new brand new plaid or something art that no one has ever seen before.
You're not interested in it?
Not really. That's never a goal. It may look like that sometimes, but the thing that I really value the most in terms of other people's reaction to what I do is like, wow, I know what you're saying. That is so familiar. I just never really did it like that before. Never thought about it like that before. It's not like, whoa, that's so brand new and so unheard of. It's like, that's just a thing to me that's like the new, which is I'm tired of the new.
It's tiring, no doubt.
Yeah,
but do you feel like do you feel this is like, I guess, you have such a career. I don't know, career is a big word, but your creation spans many years over many mediums, and it seems so fluent and diverse and kind of like very rich. And I wonder, do you feel the evolution of this feeling of like not looking for something new has always been there, or is it something that you feel from a place of being, a secure, creative person that has a structure that has already made a structure for themselves to exist in?
Well, first of all, I am not at all secure.
Oh, sorry. No.
I've never been secure.
Didn't mean to insult you.
No, it's not an insult. It's just a fact, but I, as a sculptor, when I started out as a sculptor, and I what was interesting to me was not so much what I didn't want to do, but resonance. I guess I would maybe say something like that. So I like to use things that were already there and just make them do something slightly different, or put them in a new context that people go, oh, we could do, which I see you doing as well.
Yeah, completely. That is what I'm interested in.
Yeah. And so, and that sort of like jars the mind and makes for a more interesting life. You can you don't have to go down that road yet again. And but you kind of go, oh, there, it's possibility. And so that's what I appreciate when I see work that I really like. It tends to be stuff that they're just using an idea or a color or a shape or a form in another context that makes it like unexpected and jars me a little bit. And I kind of go, oh, wow, that's a new use for that word. Even it could just be a word. It can be anything, but that shows that there's a mind that's thinking about that. It's not an inert thing, and it's not a product. It's somebody kind of went, turn it 90 degrees this way, and you're like, whoa, that's exciting, because then just, it's only about just getting out of a rut for me. I'm like, and I can't say that happens that often because a lot of things I feel are in certain forms and styles, and they do the form and style well, and it's rather predictable. And then I have a different response, which is a more, I would say, well, I hate to use the word aesthetic, but something more about the beauty of how that is, and that's also wonderful. I mean, I'm not saying that like art has to be dangerous to be good, I like something that's just a beautiful blue painting. I could really be in love with that. Do you find what do you look for in work that you see of other artists? What grabs you? What makes you kind of go, whoa, I love that?
It's different things. I do like the element of surprise. Seeing something, as you say, that is not new, perhaps where it's completely made up, which I think is also an impossible thing to really achieve in a way, but rather something that surprises me in a way that I reconsider everything around it at that point. And I'm really, my body is something that really informs my emotional state.
Say more about that. Say more about that.
I think that's why I'm so attracted to sound and music as well, is because it moves the waves, that experience moves through my body physically in a way that is hard to deny. And sometimes, our mind is our worst enemy, or mine at least sometimes. And, when I see things, I can already categorize them. I can already I have all these systems, that doesn't always make, let me see things really,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The body has a mind of its own.
The body, you can't argue with it,
Well, I think people do, but
they try.
Yeah.
It's very fashionable.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess ascetics argue with their bodies.
Who argues?
Like ascetics, people who are like just trying to like pretend they don't have a body.
Right.
Which is another way to be too, absolutely out of the body. And I have felt some things that were very true that were out of body as well, that we're not even, like this is the difference for me, for example, between VR and movies is the body. It's like when you look at a movie and the end of the movie, if you've really gotten into it, you go, oh, movie's over. Do I have a body? What you look for?
Who am I?
Been paralyzed, and you've been you haven't needed your body at all. It's been 1000% your mind. VR, which I appreciate a lot for that reason. You need your body. You have to look around. You do this, you that. You're doing this. You're doing. You need your body to experience it, and I find that very interesting, and but also being lost in a film and being paralyzed when you're like,
yeah, but
is so beautiful, and you can have a very, very deep emotional experience without moving a muscle.
Right, but there are sensory elements within that. But there is still sound with the movie, and there's this, especially when you're in the cinema, which I love. I mean, I used to go so much to the cinema before the pandemic. Now it's like a whole mental journey to like be in a space, close space with other people. But it's big. There's something very encompassing in it, and I personally still feel that does renders my body a bit different.
Yeah, I see what you mean about, of course, being overwhelming sound in a movie theater, and that of course your body's responding to all of that. I'm just thinking of it in terms of the paralysis that sets in.
Yeah,
because even if I hear an amazing soundtrack, and I heard of an amazing one yesterday when I saw the movie Tar, which is about music, and that was overwhelming, and I realized I didn't move at all for almost 3 hours. It was just completely. Well, I guess now that you say it, it was very physical in certain ways, but also just not physically expressive. I mean, but and I do find that to be a really amazing thing about doing live music. After not doing anything except in headphones or small systems, we played in the Park Avenue Armory in the middle of the pandemic, and it was amazing. We had a lot, like 6 musicians. It was very, very loud, and it's a building that's a block tall, block wide, and a block long, and I just felt like I was swimming in just huge, waves of sound that became very visceral, very visual as well. And I had forgotten what it was like to be in a very big place with a lot of people, with a lot of sound, and that's an ecstatic experience. It can be the same in a soccer game too. Just a vast sound experience that is so communal. But,
so do you? I know you have now the show and the Hirschhorn, and it's not a retrospective, right? But it's a very all-encompassing show that is in a museum. I'm interested in if you see, maybe you don't, a distinction between like doing that and performing, and does it take you to different cathartic places, or maybe one is?
I'm not sure what if catharsis is what I'm looking for, but I guess again I would maybe use a word like resonant, that of complete absorption, I would guess, of a kind of steady 60 hertz state of like attention. But so I'm not someone who has these kind of shapes of like up and down, particularly at the moment, I think. But anyway, it's I don't see a lot of difference in making a piece of music from making a big painting, for example.
Yeah,
it's the same physical gesture. It's like bowing, it's painting. It's like I ask exactly the same questions when I'm looking at painting as I am with a piece of music. Is it exciting enough? Is it crazy enough? Is it beautiful enough? Is all those things. They're all the same things. Is it too easy? Is it too whatever, and standing back is all it's, so it doesn't make so much difference whether it's sound or color particularly.
Yeah.
So I know that you're not supposed to do paintings if you're a musician. I know that.
Why is that?
Well, why is that? Because you're herded into your, bin.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I can understand that a little bit, it's like when painters just say to me, like, I think I'm thinking of making a record, like a hit record. And I'm like,
A
okay,
hit record?
go for it,
Good luck. Enjoy.
Enjoy your donkey ride.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think it's a lot easier for artists now to cross those boundaries. I'm really happy about that for younger artists who don't have to explain endlessly the stupid thing of why they're making a painting and then why they're playing the guitar. They don't have to elaborate on why that is legitimate. Kind of like, so it's better now, I think, in those terms. Are we going to talk to people who are also involved in the Zoom? Was that part of what we were going to?
There's some questions. Yeah.
I do love talking to people, seeing what's on their minds. It's like, and should we do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. It's Anne here. I'm having camera trouble, but you really all want to be looking at Naama and Laurie anyway. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. I'd be happy to read some of our questions from our Q&A in our chat box. And if anyone else wants to pop in some questions, we have a few minutes. The first question is for both of you. How do you balance formal considerations or a desire for aesthetic control to have your work look a certain way with chaos, chance, and uncertainty? And is that tension something that you embrace in your work, or is it a problem to overcome?
Laurie, I'll let you go first.
I was going to let you go first.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just too abstract a question for me, and that's different every single time.
Yeah.
Between those, and there's a lot of big words there, and I don't know. I guess what I was just saying about the criteria. I do have some, even though I like breaking rules, I also like making them up too. And what I just said about, is it beautiful enough? Is it wild enough? Is it too clever? Are all those questions that I think is it chaotic enough? Is it reasonable enough? Am I the only one who thinks this is funny? Those kinds of
Is that a good thing or a bad thing when it's only you?
I'm not putting things in good and bad stacks, not anymore, I don't think, because it's so hard to see, past just this moment, what's good and what is not. What do you think of this question, or how would you answer?
I could attempt to answer it. I actually think, I think control is a big part of artists' practice. I think we would be lying if, I don't know, maybe not for everybody, but for most artists that I know and my peers, and I think control is both a positive and a negative. And for me personally, I feel like I create structures where I can let go of control, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it does.
And that's my arts, basically. And then when you let go of control, that's when you get excited.
Yeah.
And you're surprised.
I think that actually leads really well into Doreen's question. Doreen says that she saw your exhibition at the Athenaeum, Naama, and the film of you breaking your guitar. She saw the violence, the passion, and it made her think of someone in the throes of sex. Her question to both of you is, how did you create the courage not to be concerned about what people think and to become successful while being yourselves, while being authentic?
Laurie, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, first of all, I don't care about being myself, and I'm not. That's not a goal, and it's certainly not a goal to express myself. I don't care if you know me or not, really. I don't feel like I need to go, this is the real me. I hope you like me. I'm much more of an anthropologist. I'm more interested in following people around and kind of going, what's that halo over there? Or what's that sort of jagged thing that's happening between those two things? So I guess what was the first part of that after the expression part? What part of that question? Sorry.
How did you create the courage not to be concerned about what you think and to become successful while being authentic?
Okay. So authentic is for me not a word I care about so much. I don't need to be authentic. And whether I care about what people think, I do care about what they think. I really do. Especially since I work in an art form that's very immediate, and I can see what, for the most part, people think they're invisible, if they're in an audience, and they think that if they're going like, that I can't see that. I can see that. And if I do see that, I will take that part out. If too many people are like, oh God, I will take it out. Because we don't have a lot of time here. And I don't want to waste your time. I would like to make something that you go, oh, okay. Or at least I can see at least you're making an attempt. I'm not trying to be obscure or original or get to know me sort of thing. I'm trying, I guess, to make something that will either be heartrending or so beautiful you can't stand to look at it, or really like, wow, I never thought of it like that kind of thing. But definitely not. And also, people don't. I think people forget that not many people care that much about what you call yourself. I mean, this is what I often, when I get a chance to talk to young artists, they're going like, oh, I can't call myself an artist because that's Van Gogh, or what would people think? What would my parents think? And what would I can't just say that. And I say, first of all, not that many people care about what you call yourself. They care about that as much as you care about what they call themselves, which is not a lot, So knock yourself out, call yourself whatever you feel like, whatever makes you feel good. But people don't care about you as much as you think they do. They don't think about you as much as you think they do. Think about it, just reverse it and think like, wow, do I think about that person that much? Maybe there are a couple people you're obsessing on, but generally not. So you're a lot more free than you thought, I think, in certain ways, because people, I know people now are sort of trained to be in this rating system. And so maybe I'm just speaking more for myself than I am for a 5-year-old who is getting rated nonstop. I mean, we're now in an era of rating. You have to rate your last Uber driver. You have to rate, the play that you just saw, the restaurant that you just ate at wants you to rate them. You're like, what? Stop with the rating. Just So I may not know what I'm talking about here, and that I could be so very wrong, and that somebody who could easily say to me, it's that's not true at all. People, we live in a world where people are always like at each other, and I think it's the difference between rating and caring about it. What do you think about this idea?
I think the biggest liberation, and for me personally, I completely agree, I think is letting go of the idea that people care.
Yeah.
I think it's liberating. And when you don't, when you let that go, you also understand that you don't really care that much. And that is a place where you can move more freely, and be yourself. And it's not, it sounds like a negative, but it's not actually, because it's just honest. I think it's not that people don't care for each other. It's that the things that you hold yourself against are things that people don't hold you against. They don't lift you up to that light, that you lift yourself up to. And it's very internal. And yeah, I don't, yeah, that, I think in a way, just to like maybe answer a few more, like another part of that question, and for me, well, I will also say that a small correction is that I don't break the guitar in that video, but rather the stage, which is very important for me. But there are definitely sexual tones there. I think, yeah, I think being the underdog sometimes when you just like start off is like a really liberating thing.
Yeah.
What, it's no assumptions, and that is actually something that is, if you can harness that and be true to yourself, can yield great results. And if people pay attention, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you see people that are true to themselves and underdogs, and they're just like, you think they're geniuses, and they're just under the radar for so many people. But when it, you need some luck in this life too. Nobody talks about luck, but you need some luck as well, to make things gel and happen, even when you're true to yourself and creative. And yeah.
There are lots of good questions in our Q&A and our chat. I'm sorting through. There's one about doing multiple performances of the same work. Brooks is asking how it feels to repeat performances. Does the feeling change from one performance to the next? What do you find after multiple performances of the same work?
What do you think, Naama?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I mean, I think for me, it's a bit different because well, my performances are really linked to shows, exhibitions, and so they're always limited. So even if we do 5 performances in 2 days, or 6 performances in 3 days, the last performance is always very sad for me, because I know I will never hear this piece again. I never experienced it in my body. I don't write scores for my performances. It's a kind of like an event that is in a specific place and time, and then it's never repeated. And so for me, it's that repetition within that set of days, 3 days, 4 days, whatever it is kind of like joyous. And I feel, I just want, it's like you're eating something that you really like. If the performance is good and you're happy with it, and you just want to eat it, and like after those 4 days, you will never taste it again. And so you're just enjoying every bite. That's how it is for me. And I feel it's never a repetition in that sense. What do you think, Laurie?
Well, I have a question. Do you feel like you could do this music in like a club or in a concert hall, or do you feel this is really just strictly installation work? Because I think it's one of the things that's interesting about about music and installation is that they're getting kind of blurry, you know, and I'm wondering if you could see it starting from a music venue as opposed to a visual arts place.
Yeah, 100%. I am now at the moment in my career that I'm, or my creative doings, that there is a specific works that I feel could be at specific venues that are music venues.
Great.
Yeah.
Let me know when you're going to go there. I'd love to see the
Yeah.
debut show, because that's a
Yeah.
really interesting transition to put it in a different context, because it does make people hear and see things differently. Very different.
The audience they come with different expectations, which are wonderful.
For you as a musician, I would think that would be really, really an interesting thing to do, you know.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
What other questions do we have?
There's one from Grace, who is an artist. And I think maybe we'll close out with this one. She is also a deep listening facilitator and change worker. And she's curious to hear your take on how we can get people who don't want to hear to open their ears, so that collectively we don't remain in separated echo chambers.
I'll let you go for that one, Laurie.
Well, you know, I think people hear what they want to hear. And it has to be a pretty good melody to get in the ear and stay there if you don't want it. So that's a really big challenge. I don't know. It's like a really selective. Hearing can be very selective. Hear what you want to, and then this is one of the things that I think is a huge question in our country, because you know, just in my humble opinion, I feel like the fracture is about not being able to hear the other, let's call it side for a second, just being deaf to it and not being able to hear anything but your own thing now. So how do you make that happen? Humor is maybe one thing, and you know, just to be just a little lighter. You know, and we live in such a serious place these days. You know, it's just like a mudslinging place where language is just turned into something that's extremely crude. And so I'm hoping that with either humor or with using words in a really original and exciting way, that people could kind of go, oh, maybe I should consider that other side. So because it's just about sloganeering now, and about reinforcing your own opinions of how to get people to listen to a new tune. That's what we really have to do, you know. What do you think, Bella?
Yeah, I think that is our problem. I feel there's a way to get people to listen if they don't know if they think they're listening to something else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If they think, you know, if they think they're listening to what they want to hear,
yeah, you
can play anything in their ears and they'll listen. And so I think that is the trick. And it's maybe it's kind of like what we touched upon. It's how do you see the same thing and see it differently? So it's kind of how do you say what they want to hear, but say it differently in a way where you're saying something else actually, but you're penetrating through, because you come with with something that is familiar to them and is part of their agenda. It could be language. It could be the way you look. It could be a sound, something that appeals to them. It could be a smell that I don't know. I feel like there's many ways to open people up to hearing by introducing something to them that they want to hear or see, feel, you know?
Yeah. So at this point, people have a lot of influence too, and even more so than the logic of what they're saying. Like if somebody that you like and respect says something, you go, oh yeah, I agree with that, without thinking.
Yes.
And that seems to be the way it's working. So if we can get more people to speak up about saying what they think, then
Yes.
unfortunately, it'll still be sort of like taking sides instead of people really considering themselves what they think. But so maybe that's not a good idea at all. But I having an open mind is something I aspire to. I don't necessarily have one. When I think of how divided this country is, I'm thinking like, why do they want guns? What's wrong with it? It's a kind of what's wrong with them sort of thing. And I realized that those two things were the day that you mentioned when you did your concert there, which right after Roe and of course right after the guns as well, was, we're not fighting about small things in this country. We're fighting about, I see them as a shifting scale. On one side is death, and on the other side is freedom. And so in those arguments, our big national arguments, they're all about those two things. So when it's guns, some people think guns are freedom. Other people see guns as death. With abortion, some people see abortion as freedom. Some people see abortion as death. So these are huge things that we are arguing, not small things. So what you consider what it is to be free is up for grabs here, and on one side it's like, let's fall in line and let's all agree and let's like be strong, and the other side is looking at it from a very different point of view. The authoritarian side seems to be winning out at the moment, not just here but across the world. I don't know. It's a wonderful time to be an artist, I think, because it's some really amazing basic things that people are really struggling with, whether they define it as that or not. They might just say, no, it's just about guns and abortion, but it really is, it's about who we are.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for taking that very profound last question and for your responses. I think we're all here tonight because we all believe that artists can change the world. And you are doing your parts, Laurie Anderson and Naama Tsabar. Thank you so much for joining us with the Wadsworth Athenaeum tonight. I hope that everyone races down to Washington, D.C. to see the tail end of Laurie's show at the Hirshhorn, if you haven't already, and comes here to the Wadsworth to see our show of Naama Tsabar's work in Matrix 189, and that you'll join us for performances on September 10 and 11. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, Naama. Thank you, everyone at Wadsworth. Bye.